Today, we answer one of the most important questions in all of Warhammer. Which race has the most potent soul of all? Finally, after 4 years of constant building, I shall reveal what I believe to be one of the deepest secrets of the entire setting. And at the end of this video, you shall know all you need to discuss this topic in detail, and then to draw your own conclusions. But for us to understand the answer to this fundamental point, we must truly understand the question. For it is not as simple as one might think. Some would instantly blurt out a single name signifying a race, and then sit back content that they know the truth of the matter. But I believe that it is not that simple, and I have another response entirely. Yet, for my answer to make any sense, then surely we must explore the topic in its entirety. Hence, this is exactly what we shall do. I am Baldermort, your faithful servant, and today, gentle listener, I shall take you on a journey into the very souls and afterlives, powers and purpose of each of the major races in the Warhammer universe. But first, a very brief word from the sponsors of this video. World of Warships, the gnarly naval challenge where you can take command of over 650 historically accurate ships of the line. It's a PC game of teamwork, tactics, and sheer unadulterated carnage. With a plethora of maps, shifting weather, and gorgeous graphics, no two games are the same. Captain your vessel to victory in every class: destroyers, cruisers, battleships, submarines, and even the dreaded aircraft carrier. Smash and sink your enemies with artillery, torpedoes, and aircraft. You can pick it up for a single scrap, or go on a veritable rampage across the high seas. The content is updated and enriched every single month, with collabs and festival specials galore. And it's all free and waiting for you. Sign on today and receive a welcome pack worth €25, including 500 doubloons, 7 days of premium action, 2 million credits, a tier 4 ship, and a 6 skill point commander. World of Warships. So, Captain, what are you waiting for? Hit the links in the description, and let's go. And thank you for your patience. So, let us begin. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is immutable, incontrovertible proof of the existence of the soul. That energy that binds and penetrates a being and gives animus to flesh. The personality, wishes, hopes and dreams, feelings, frustrations and thoughts of a sentient being. That which makes them an individual. Their soul. How souls are formed or why is not entirely clear, but sentience is its very grounding. For the dark gods do not lust for the essences of dogs or cats, whales or sprats. These beings exist in the corporeal world, what is known as the materium, the reality we all experience now. Yet in the Warhammer setting, there is also the mirror realm, the warp, the sea of souls, the psychic realm, the immaterium. All describe the other world that is equal yet opposite to the physical, and it is a dark and terrible place. Some beings are known to exist in both realms, the materium and the immaterium, for they have a soul. It exists in the warp as much as the body does in real space, a psychic imprint of the identity of the sentient being. And it is only sentient beings that have such a connection, as far as I am aware. So sentience would seem to be the precursor or origin of this soul. Yet, even in this, there are nuances. Some say it is purely a biological and natural body that can sustain or even generate a soul. Yet, sentience can be artificial and, although I do not wish to get too bogged down, there is some evidence of non-biologicals developing what may very well be a soul or so. Yet these are the exceptions to the rule, so I will address these oddities at another time. Now, to say that any sentient has a soul is not the end of the matter, for not all souls are created equal, it seems. And as some beings are larger or faster, stronger or more intelligent, So are their levels of potence in the souls that the races have. Degrees of exhibited powers amongst the differing members of these races also. And sometimes a blazing soul can be an intense disadvantage. Now let us begin to look at each race in detail. And we shall start with the youngest of the races, the technologically driven Tau. The Tau. Having erupted into the galactic stage in only the last few millennia, the Tau are an oddity indeed. For they are one of the few races that cannot trace their genesis to the Old Ones. In fact, there are some who believe that they are weapons themselves, created by either the Eldar or the Necron race. But in any case, the Tau are very different to the norm. The reason for this is that they are sentient, formidable in their intelligence, visionary in their ability to innovate and create. They have every indicant, every marker for having bright and dripping spiritual simulacrums. Yet, of all the races we will cover tonight, the Tau have the most meager of souls. Their shades in the warp are tiny and dim, leading them to have absolutely no psychic potential of any sort. They do not have any mutations like navigators who can see into the warp to guide their ships. They have no psychers amongst their race that can harness the power of the warp. Now they have allies who can, so they are aware of some of the horrors of the warp, especially with the advent of the fourth sphere expansion. Yet the Tau themselves are about as psychic as a brick. Yet this stands in stark contrast to their listed attributes. They are no less emotional, creative, or artistic than any other race, more so than many. Yet their souls are barely a nibble for the demonic denizens of the Dark Realms. Hence we can see that, despite sentience being a precursor to a soul, the level of the minds of a being are not an indicant of their potence. Strange, but in the dark future, it is still so. Now there are some that say that their one class above all, their ethereals, could well be using some form of psychic control over the rest of their race. Yet, to me, this seems unlikely. I believe that if this is the case, then the authority they exhibit is far more likely to be due to some form of pheromone or hypnotic trance, not psyche, which means warp-derived in its genesis. For the Tau soul, this means a multitude of things, but the most important are simple. 1. When they die, they do not have a central core to their soul. They do not hold firm in the shifting tides of the warp, and thus there can be no afterlife for them, no future. The minuscule energies of their souls just drift apart, are absorbed into the warp almost immediately. Number 2. It also means that their souls cannot be dined upon by the dark gods. They are simply so insubstantial that they are not worthy of the consuming. Thus, they are never a target of the entities of the warp. And this one fact, that they are sentient and powerful in the physical realm, but almost immune to the blandishments of the warp, means that they are potentially a very useful weapon in the war against chaos. For what better warrior can you have than one who is without doubt utterly unable to be affected, swayed, or controlled by the enemy? Now some say that a Tau will eventually develop to become psychic, that sometimes a race will bloom later on as humanity has. Yet this ignores the fact that the races that do so are generally, if not entirely, the progeny of the Old Ones. So, in my mind, from all that I have read thus far, there is simply no kernel of potential even in them to fan into a flame. Thus, the Tau are the weakest of all souls we shall discuss today, and by some measure. The Necrons. The Necrons are no children of the Old Ones, for they were stalking the galaxy when that ancient race was in its first bloom. They are the ones who destroyed the Old Ones, but only with the help of their dark star gods, the Catan, and only once they and the Catan had transformed. For the Necrons are soulless now, but this was not always the case. Once, when they went out into the stars, the Necrontyr were as biological and real as we are today. They had their loves and laughter, though in short supply, for their lives were terrible existences of never-ending pain. Yet their souls were potent enough. They felt rage and hate as keenly as any demon does now. Then, before their transformation. Yet, they were always the masters of technology and the physical. It cannot be stated categorically if they did not have souls every bit as potent as their enemies, the Old Ones, yet it is unlikely. For they did not explore the potentials of the warp, did not indulge in mysticism or magic, but this could as easily have been a repercussion of their twisted, excruciating lives and the culture that came from it. It is almost universally accepted that most magical systems rely on control, patience, introspection, and discipline, and none of these were traits of the Necrontyr. Yet, that they had souls cannot be argued. For when they went into the biotransference modules and their bodies were rendered down, their sentience transferred to metallic containers, their new necrodermis bodies, the byproduct is what made their allies so potent, so powerful. The Catan, their star gods, tricked the Necrontyr into undergoing this process for the ultimate promise, that of immortality. For the star gods stated that they too had warred with the Old Ones, but had been defeated. Whether this was true or not, none can tell. Yet the truth of the matter is that the Catan were magnified 1,000-fold as they hovered above the transference and supped on the souls of their slaves. Vast power was released as the entire race of the Necrontyr were shorn of their bodies, their souls being stripped from them in the process, and the Catan drank deep of this power, absorbing it and becoming engorged with potence. They then set out on their war of vengeance. They destroyed the Old Ones, and much of the galaxy as well, if tales are to be believed. Hence, the Necrontyrs once had souls, and even today there are cryptics amongst their number attempting to reverse the process, to move the race from their metallic shells back into a biological body, all in the hopes of regaining what they lost, their souls. The Orcs. Originally called the Krork, they are a weapon of war designed and propagated by the Old Ones. The Orcs are perhaps their deadliest weapon, engineered to near perfection. To say that the Orcs are different to other races is an understatement. There are so many examples of this, but none is more elucidating than their very souls and afterlife, or their beliefs at the very least. For few can tell if the Orcs are delusional, or if they are the most sane sentients in a deeply insane universe. The Krork were designed to be the ultimate weapon against the Necrons. I think they were created to counter them as much as the Eldar were forged to best the powers of the Catan. Alas, the Eldar did not toe the line, feeling themselves greater than their creators, and thus they did not fight the Necron-Catan alliance with anything like the verve and enthusiasm of the later created Krork. For I honestly believe that the Old Ones had many a template that they were trying to perfect. The Eldar were mighty indeed, but far too independent, and far too smug. They would not take commands from the Old Ones eventually, and even thought that they were their superiors, is what some ancient tales infer. Thus, I honestly believe that the Krork were created later, a more efficient way of dealing with the enemies of the Old Ones. For the Krork have so many markers that can be construed as improvements on previous weapons. The Old Ones made many races, the Rashan, Kinib, Jakero, Eldar, and Krork. From what I can tell, what I surmise, it is very possible that the Krork were a desperate weapon created to work fast and on a huge scale. Now many a dandy will extol the virtuosity of the Eldar, but we shall get to them in due course. Yet I believe that the Krork, who became the Orcs, are actually more formidable in very elusive and nuanced ways. Yes, the Eldar soul is so potent that they can crush others with the wave of a hand and an idle thought, but they have to concentrate, have to be trained and disciplined for decades, if not centuries, to gain this level of skill. Not so the Orcs. For the Orcs generate a field from their very souls, the dreaded Wa energy. And in so doing, they affect reality on the quantum level, without even thinking about it. Items and weapons that should, by all rights, be useless piles of scrap, in the hands of Orcs, they are teleporters or shock attack guns. No logical way to deal with them can be formed, as is shown by the fact that Imhotep the Stormlord, mightiest Nemesaur of all Necrons, is utterly baffled by the greenskins, and it is only they who have ever made him taste lasting defeat, if one ignores the blip of Helbrecht, of course. The orcs are odd in many ways, for their souls are believed to be as long-lasting as the Eldar as well, for both reincarnate. The Eldar I will explain soon, but the similarities are stark. Also, that the orc souls seem to be merging to create a huge galactic sprawling subconscious. It is through this network of power that the War can burst out. Orcs do not even have to hear of a War to know one is forming. They simply know. Call to the muster as if sleepwalking, and all of this due to their innate psychic abilities. Yet, like the later entries, they also have specialized beings who have a much stronger connection to the warp, what we all call psychers. And when a congregation of orcs comes together, the numbers reaching a critical point, then these psychers can burst into existence, not because of lengthy and protracted bloodlines or lineages. It is built into every single one of them. Where the orcs require psychers, so do they appear amongst their number. The orcs have absolutely no fear of death either, for they were never cowed by the curse of Azagorod the Nightbringer, most powerful of all of the Catan, so they do not fear death at all. But more so, it is because they believe that when they die, their souls are gobbled up by Gork and Mork, and when these great gods are ready, they vomit them back into a new orc body. So much akin to their Eldar racial siblings. And Gork and Mork are two gods that are possibly the most potent beings in the warp, for they have had the love and devotion of the ubiquitous greenskins for many tens of millions of years. Just consider that. For some say that the Emperor is becoming a god in the warp due to the prayers and belief of humanity for a mere 10,000 years, although there is nuance there I will get to later. And the dark gods of chaos are meant to have started growing in the warp during the war in heaven. They have been fed and gestated for tens of thousands of years, between 38 to 39 centuries, if we are to adhere to old lore, as the first three dark gods were birthed in the first and second millennium. But the Krork gods have been in existence for over 60 million years. Imagine how powerful they must be now. Even if they are thought constructs like the Eldar gods, it matters little their genesis. Their power can barely be conceived, if only they were truly interested in the goings-on in real space. And orc psychers, weird boys or warpheads, are some of the most potent souls in existence, yet not unto themselves. They merely act as conduits to the vast war energies that their race produce when gathered in numbers. Hence the orcs are an amazing race in the spiritual realms. For they may want to fight all, but never out of sheer malice. They may want to burn and destroy everything they come near to, but not because they are evil. In fact, of all of the races, it is possibly the orcs that provide the least sustenance for the gods of chaos. Their souls are protected by Mork and Gork every bit as much as Segara does for the jesters of the Eldar. Yet, any act of war goes to those great gods, or Gork and Mork, and not to Khorne. They do not have carnal lusts, so judge the majority of the power of Slaanesh. They barely shrug when they contract an illness, and never experience pain as badly as other beings, so they simply do not have the nerves to carry such sensations. Hence, none will usually go over to the worship of Nurgle. And to say that they are direct is an understatement. Hence the plotting and conniving of Tzeentch bears absolutely no appeal to the greenskins whatsoever. Now there are always exceptions to every rule, and Chaos Orcs do exist, but in such minuscule numbers that they can literally be ignored by all but the completionist or some stiff-necked effete swat. But all of this shows that they are formidable souls in the Krork, yet it is their collected species' subconscious or racial soul that makes them so astonishingly potent. There is no art to their displays of power, no skill or restraint, but only a fool would ignore their bright and dripping soul stuff and the power it can unleash when harnessed by the War. I consider their abilities to be a development of those shown by the Jukero, who can make technological wonders as if by instinct. The Krork or Orcs are so much more powerful and developed than they are, because they do not have to understand or develop a single thing. They can simply get enough orcs to believe their weapons will work for them to do exactly that. Hence, I believe the orcs are far superior weapon to the Eldar, no matter what I may say later about said race. For they do not have to be persuaded or cajoled or bargained with to engage with the enemies of their creators. The Krork were pointed in a direction, and off they went, happy as Larry to be a part of the action, a near infinite improvement on the lackadaisical Eldar. And there is some evidence to support the orcs' reincarnations, as some say that the present Lord of Carnage, Ghazghkull Mag Uruk Thraka, is in fact the reincarnation of the greatest orc warlord seen since Alanor, the beast who near shattered the Imperium in Millennium 32. In any case, the orcs are powerful souls with massive protections from the only real threats from the warp, the dark gods of chaos, and that cannot be underestimated. The Tyranids. Now this is a complex issue, or a very simple one, depending on how you look at things. For the bugs have not shown individuality or true sentience whenever they are cut from the hive mind. Hence, it could be stated that perhaps, just perhaps, there are not souls inside any of their soldiers, any of their many types, varieties, or strains of war beasts, and that would be a troubling thing indeed. For if this is in fact the case, then the entire race has the one soul that drives it, the one mind that extends itself into every one of its elements. And this is far too close to how the dark gods of chaos actually work in the warp. For is this not exactly the same, but the flip side? The dark gods cut parts of themselves off into smaller, self-contained parcels, and that is how we get demons. And that seems to be exactly what the bug does with its constituent parts, yet on the physical plane instead of the warp. Or, even more worryingly, perhaps they are more akin to the sloth, as these beings are known to be sentient collections of nasty insects as well. A harrowing thought that the Tyranids could be some form of hyper-developed sloth, or that those dark beings may somehow be early iterations of the Tyranids, like the original lore for the Zotes, that they may be an early tendril of lesser bugs sent to see the lay of the land in the Milky Way galaxy. Unlikely, but it is all too familiar. Let us put that down to nature repeating itself in this case, as otherwise the ramifications are mind-blasting, would take a video all unto itself. But I digress. The bugs. No bug has ever been possessed by a demon. No bug, no Tyranid, has ever been caught bending to the powers of chaos, not to my knowledge. As such, it is exceptionally unlikely, despite the power shown by some of the psychobugs of the Tyranids, that they do anything more than draw on the power of that one Gestalt soul that drives them all, much akin to the way that the Sisters of Battle call upon miracles from the Emperor, perhaps. But a topic for another day, one I may ask Remlays of 40K Theories to look into, as he is far the superior lore peddler. But let us move on. The Eldar. And so we get to what most consider to be the ultimate souls in all of Warhammer, the redoubtable Eldar. And one of my favourite factions, truth be told. I do love my elves, so bear that in mind as I continue. Ancient beyond reckoning, the Eldar are children of the Old Ones and contemporaries of the Catan Necrons and their other sibling races, the Rashan, Knib, Jakero, and Krork. Now some say that they could potentially be even more potent in the psychic arts than the Old Ones, yet I have seen zero evidence of this in any of my wanderings around this phenomenal setting. Thus I discard this contention. They may have used the webway, but they did not forge it. Of all of the races that escaped that terrible confrontation at the dawn of time, the war in heaven, the Eldar came out the most powerful. Designed and then carefully trained and taught by the Old Ones, the Eldar are considered by many to be the pinnacle of their creations, for theirs are bright and blazing souls. Their affinity for the warp, to be psychers, is not frequent or even common. It is a birthright of every single Eldar born before the fall, and theirs was the role to directly confront the Catan, the Star Gods, so far as I can see it. More to the point, the Eldar also had totemic weapons, beings made out of their own collected subconscious, much akin to Gork and Mork, but far more pointed and elect in their uses and deployment. Long has it been surmised that the beings that the Eldar eventually called their gods were in fact more thought forms. Weapons constructed by huge gatherings of Eldar, much as humans may gather their resources and skill to create a fleet or titan or army. The Eldar were said to be able to use their psychic might, their connection to the warp, to forge these deadly totemic weapons. For no mere Eldar, no matter how individually endowed or trained, would be able to face a Catan alone. Yet, with the collected might of hundreds, thousands, or even millions of psychic Eldar, the totemic beings known as Kalamanchikane, Kurnus, Asuyan, Ishur, or Segara would have been more than able to take on and take down one of the masters of the Necrons. And the Eldar are so self-contained, so aware of their dual existence in the physical and spiritual, that they had no fear of death either. But this was because they too could reincarnate. But it was not by the auspices of some god or thought construct. The Eldar soul is simply strong enough, tough enough, aware enough, to exist in the warp even without a body to tether it in the one place. When the Tau or other souls may simply drift apart upon their deaths, the Eldar soul began a new adventure. Each Eldar spirit would go forth into the warp and have new experiences, or rest, or contemplate its own existence until it was time. Then they would be reborn into a later generation of their race. The enemies of the Eldar, so the enemy they would face across a battlefield, could actually be a soul so old, a warrior so experienced, that they may have fought hundreds or even thousands of battles in their past lives. This is how the Eldar were so lethal as to make the Necrons go into their slumber to avoid their wrath. When the Catan were dealt with by the Eldar and the Necrons themselves, they simply could not stand before the Eldar fury, so the Necrons fled through time itself to avoid them. This is also how the Eldar were able to cull their erstwhile allies, the Krork, to such an extent that their numbers dwindled so low that the Krork devolved down into becoming the Orcs. Never once in over 60 million years have the Krork recovered from this most detestable betrayals from their old allies. Culled again and again, the Orcs were left as mild nuisances at the edges of the galaxy. But the Eldar merely looked after a universe that they inherited. They did not change or alter it in any meaningful way whatsoever. They did not go out into the darkness between galaxies. For over 60 million years, the Eldar merely acted as caretakers to the galaxy, until inevitably, inexorably, they defeated themselves. The Eldar ruled the galaxy for so long that there were no threats to them whatsoever, even when humanity rose up to a level where they considered themselves able to look their siblings in the eye. Well, the rot had already set in by that point. The Eldar were simply not interested in anything but their own gratification by that point. They simply could not be bothered to slap the humans down, is what they would assert. Perhaps this is true. Or perhaps they felt a tiny kinship with the humans of the golden age of technology, even a little. But in either case, they did not wish a drawn-out confrontation with the younger race, because they were spiraling towards their fall. And the Eldar are the only other race to be directly responsible for the birth of a god of chaos, the fourth, the last, one hopes. They call it She Who Thirsts, Slaanesh, the Prince of Pleasure. And now the Eldar are terrified of death, for they know exactly what is waiting their bright souls when they are shorn from their protective flesh. They all become a meal for their enemy, their child, the darkness they created. Slaanesh. She consumes their souls as soon as their last breath leaves their body, or so it is said. And the Eldar ways of countering this dire doom are varied by their culture. The Craftworld Eldar have what are called spirit stones, things taken from the edges of the Eye of Terror, where the warp bleeds into real space. For these psychoactive gemstones can be used to harness and contain the soul of a fallen Eldar. From there, The stone can be placed into sconces in a craft world, and the soul can slip into the infinity circuit, a massive psychic realm akin to an afterlife within the very structure of the vast Eldar city ships. They can be left to languidly exist there forever, or can be called upon for advice, or even begged to return to a shadow life to assist their kin in times of war. For a soul can be called from the infinity circuit and then placed within a set of armor created by the Eldar's bone singers. Alike to a dreadnought, they are housing only, and should the Eldar soul be slain whilst inside a wraith construct, as they are called, then it may be utterly and totally destroyed. But most importantly, the Eldar do not reincarnate any longer. I have not read nor heard of a single instance where a soul has been taken from the infinity circuit and then forced or moved into a new Eldar body. So, in a very real way, the Eldar are diminished to an extent that they would scarce believe possible, but a mere 10,000 years ago. Now there are other Eldar, the Exodites, the Eladrith, the Dark Eldar, and of course, the Harlequins. The Exodites, trying to live as their ancestors did on near paradise planets that they call Maiden Worlds. They have a similar type of affair to the Infinity Circuit, but it is called the World Spirit, and the dead of the Eldar Exodite souls then become one with this vast World Spirit. Alas, many an Exodite world has been invaded, and the souls of the Eldar for centuries dined upon by the greater demons of Slaanesh. There are the Dancers, the Harlequins, and they have no soul stones, no world spirit. They have faith in one of the last Eldar gods still active, Segara. And it is the Harlequins' belief that when they die, that their souls are fought over by she who thirsts and their lord, the great Harlequin, and that Segara always wins, always manages to snatch their delicious souls from the very maw of Slaanesh before her jaws can close on the morsel. The Dark Eldar are not the same at all. For when the fall of the Eldar happened, they were all in the webway. Yet they were somehow closer to the ground zero that was the birth scream of Slaanesh. And her scream was echoed in their dark realm, and it burst their souls. Not like a water balloon hit by a juggernaut, but like a slow puncture in a wheel. A hole was created in their souls that constantly dripped their essence into Slaanesh. They could feel her dining on their souls as they drew breath, and despite how dire and loathsome their souls already were, it made them even worse, for it somehow changed their souls on a fundamental level. Now, Eldar from that lineage have the ability to top up their souls by watching and performing depravities. The more pain and horror they witness, the more they refill the dark souls being sucked on by she who thirsts. It is strange indeed that they have actually benefited so greatly from this twist in their fate. For a Dark Eldar can be vaporized, can be reduced to nothing but the tiniest collection of nerves or flesh, and still then recover. The souls can be regrown and brought back to full power by exposing them to the deepest depths of horror. So, Dark Eldar will leave a tiny part of themselves as insurance whenever they go on a real space raid. And if they should expire in this event, then they will simply have that tiny fingertip strand of hair or pound of flesh placed within an oubliette with a homunculus, who will expose it to anguish and pain beyond the conception of mortals. And it will regrow, not just the body, but the soul itself. So do the Dark Eldar not just dodge the effects of the fall, but they do turn them to their advantage. Yet the thing that they lose in this trade-off is their psychic ability. It is not only illegal to display psychic powers in the Dark City, it is a rare Dark Eldar who can actually perform such a deed anymore at all. Only usually the tourists who are the Harlequins, or those who have come to the Dark City from a Craftworld Eldar line, and they are told to restrain their powers on pain of death. And much is made of the eldest spiritual wonders that the Eldar could create. Some tales tell of technologies that allowed them to simply think an armada of ships into existence. The Eldar were that developed. Yet with all of this power at their fingertips, ask yourself, what did they do with it? They got bored. Then they fell to ennui. Then down to depravity. The Eldar may well have the most demonstrable psychic potence, the greatest knowledge and power in all arts mystic. Their Black Library is said to contain secrets so terrible, an understanding of the darkest realms of the warp so deep, that they could blind the Emperor himself with their knowing alone. Yet, for all of their control, what exactly have they achieved? The final answer must be nothing. Nothing whatsoever. They did not cleanse the warp. They did not hunt down the growing powers lurking in the dark. They did not dispel, disband, exterminate, or clean away the forming horrors that will become the Dark Gods. Sorry, my fellow Eldar fans, but they did nothing. The humans. And so, gentle listener, it has become time to speak of the last children of the Old Ones. Us. Humanity. Now I shall be making some bold claims, to be sure, but trust in me, hear me out, and I shall explain that which you have been waiting to hear. And it is something that only 4 years ago would be complete bunkum. But everything, and I mean everything, has now changed. One last ancient did survive the war in heaven. One, and it made just one more race. The humans. And, as I believe from what I know, what I then go on to suspect, it was in us, in humanity, that they made their most bold play. As I have tried to describe before, I believe that the races of the Old Ones can be seen in a progression, each one building on the powers, errors, and honors of the one before. I may be utterly incorrect, but it is a wondrous dream. For I believe that we can trace what the Old Ones intended. What was their great plan? The Jukero could make and build on instinct alone, but were not warlike. The Eldar were the perfect weapon against the Catan, but bolted the horrors of war, were pampered by a distant hand guiding them. The Eldar had the potential to be utterly dominant in the warp, and to guard the realm as much as fight. But the Old Ones were losing their war. So they made a more blunt tool. The Krork is what many will think. And that may be so. But they also combined the powers of the previous races and simplified them for utility. The Krork could generate colossal psychic power, but raw. They could make things beyond their wit to know how. They built as the Jukero did, but by instinct, and they were made for war. Yet the Orcs or Krorks are like the ultimate white cells. When they are slain, they multiply faster. When they are needed to repel an enemy, they cluster by instinct, not by diplomacy. Perfect against the Necrons, or others. Yet they could also manipulate the very fabric of reality in a blunt and simple way. So, the Eldar seemed to be designed to tend the garden, the Krork to rise up against invaders. And then, the last surviving Old One hid, and he thought for millions of years. Then, he made that which was needed most. I shall explain. Humanity was gifted with something that was more subtle, but far more powerful than the blatant light of the Eldar. Like the Orcs, they affect reality far more than can be usually seen. Faith has shown this, but also the very forms of the dark gods of chaos. For Khorne was formed in the first millennia, then Tzeentch, then Nurgle in the second. As stated in early lore, humanity gave them form. The power existed already for each of these gods. They had been slowly coalescing in the warp, becoming more. But it was humanity, not Eldar, Necron, Jukero, or Krork. It was humanity who shaped them. How? Because humans are made for something far more than anything previously planned. As I have stated in my entries on the Dark Gods themselves, I believe that the Chaos Gods are twisted avatars of humanity, of positive forces that could have been used as totemic mechanisms, but on a cosmic scale. humans have an incredible effect on the warp. This cannot be denied. By my reasoning, humanity has its few psychers, but it was given time to develop its knowledge of the real world first. The psychic awakening of the race was always foretold. Even in the first book of this amazing universe, it was there. Humanity was always destined to become as psychically active as the Eldar. I feel the last Old One gave us time to mature, so we could gain identity and resilience, and also to do in real space what was intended in the warp, to learn about it. Then, when we became more psychically aware, it was always supposed to be a slow process. But the AI rebellion, the dark times of Old Night, they broke the cycle. Humanity was supposed to gain its powers when it was at its cultural and evolutionary height, but it came at the wrong time. You see, I believe that humans in Warhammer have a soul that is not as bright as an Eldar's, because theirs is self-contained. We know this. It does not dissipate, but it does not affect that around itself without real effort. Yet humanity has such an insatiable hunger, a drive as strong as any orc, to not just continue, not to destroy, not really. We are known for something even more. We clean, we build, and we explore. Can you imagine the universe without chaos, with humanity at its zenith for 60 million years? You think we will be content here, in this galaxy alone? Yet the Eldar did this for that long. They merely maintained. The humans were the last Old One's attempt to clear this mess all up. For humanity could inherit the galaxy from the Eldar. When they were wise enough, they could cleanse the warp and reality of every taint of chaos. They could bring peace to the universe. Their innate ability to affect reality on a subtle and subconscious way was their true strength. Yet, there was too much against them. There was not enough time. And Slaanesh shattered the last Old One, so he could not guide us. He could not shepherd us into our rightful place as the true inheritors of the galaxy. For our inquisitive souls are now burning brightly after the psychic awakening. The faith and thoughts of humanity can make them fly, shield them from harm, and even more wondrous events. Thus is the human soul not even more potent than that of the Eldar now? Yet one question remains. What happens to human souls? When a human dies, there can be only three possibilities. The first is that their soul drifts apart and becomes one with the warp. The second is that they are dragged into the clutches of a sick and terrifying monster, a demon, to punish and consume them. For there is no linear time in the warp, so this torture would seem like it is going on for eternity. The third. At present, it is said that those souls that are worthy, exceptional, burning bright in faith and deeds performed, will be drawn into the embrace of the Emperor, much like the Valkyrie taking souls to Valhalla. Some others believe he has a paradise for them to dwell in when the toil of life has ended, where they can finally know peace. And we know that the Emperor can indeed summon certain souls, or professes to be able to do so. The Emperor is the key. For I do not know if he was always intended. Was he ever in the great plan? I do not know if the shamans of Earth were right to do what they did, or was he a freak of nature, an accident who was born immortal, and one who has dragged humanity from its intended course? Or were the spirits of the shamans sundered in time, and the spell they cast only partially successful? Were the other perpetuals just fragments of that great merging lost in the streams of reincarnation, unable to fully merge with the whole that was the Emperor, the defender of humanity, our own totemic power? For the Emperor can be called many things, be seen from many points of view. Yet the one I like to take at this present moment is that he has always known what humanity could and would become, and that he just tried to rush the matter, because of what he had seen during Old Night, because of what the universe has become. The Emperor was inheritor of knowledge, a child so obviously of the Old Ones, driven to guide, yet with the steel to last the course, to fight for a brighter future. And that, I believe, is the ultimate secret of Warhammer, the ultimate irony. The human purpose, drive, and soul are the most potent of all. That humanity was the last chance of the old ones, their last gift, an attempt to heal the universe. A pity in so many ways, for it does not seem to be working. The end times approach, but are they truly the end everyone thinks? For it is only when the hour is darkest that a light truly shines. Perhaps, just perhaps, humanity will survive these dark moments and then do what it was always intended to do. For to defeat evil, all we have to do is say, "No, I will not kill for corn. No, I will not deceive for Tzeentch. No, I will not be defeated by Nurgle. And no, I will not lose control to Slaanesh." And when we can all live by those 4 sentences, humanity destroys its greatest enemy of all, the greatest enemy of the entire universe, the errors of the past. Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Tulum.